Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to our symposium today. We are so excited to have you. We're going to give just a minute for everyone to get in and get started. I'm Christy Lamb with the Modern Principal. We have so much good information for you today about the science of reading and how Just Right Reader take-homes can really help accelerate student achievement in your school or your district. So again, we'll give everyone just a moment to get in. I know sometimes when we're letting in big groups of people into Zoom, it takes just a minute to make sure that everyone can see all of the same things that we're seeing. So welcome, welcome. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Hopefully we've got everyone in. Like I said, hi, I'm Christy Lamb. I am one half of the Modern Principal. We use our platform to hopefully bring together groups of principals all over the country and even all over the world, really trying to identify real life leadership problems and solutions. Both of us are former elementary and middle school principals and just love the role and love supporting it. Part of that role we know is leading literacy. And so we have two literacy experts in their own right here today. We have Sara Rich, who is the founder and CEO of Just Right Reader. Sara is also a former principal of over 20 years and specialized in turning around schools through using the science of reading and using all of the best literacy techniques and strategies to really turn schools around. We also have today Dr. Ray Reutzel. He is a senior research fellow at the Center for the School of the Future at Utah State University. Dr. Reutzel has published more than 235 articles on early literacy and early childhood education. His work has earned him the International Literacy Association's highest recognition, the William S. Gray Citation of Merit. People, this is only given once a year to one person in the entire world, and Dr. Reutzel is one of those 35 people who has earned this award. It's pretty amazing. He's also an elected member and former president of the International Reading Hall of Fame. Dr. Ray Reutzel, welcome. We are so excited to have you and can't wait to learn more about what you have to share. Oh, you are muted. While he's getting unmuted, we just want to again welcome everyone. We are recording our session today. You will be receiving a copy of the recording in your email after today's session. And please feel free, as Dr. Reutzel is talking or as Sara is sharing today about decodable text, please be sure to share your questions in the Q&A spot at the bottom of your screen. We'd love to have those. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of today's session.
Thanks for that introduction, Christy. I'm looking forward to the time we're going to get to spend together. Before we got on, I learned a little bit about who's here. Most of you are building leaders. Some of you are district leaders, and then we have a few teachers on board with us today. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the science of reading and what we know for effective practice. And then we're going to talk about how the Just Right Reader offerings, especially the take-home books, are going to be great to help students maintain their progress through the summer. So let's get right into it. Let's make sure that as we talk about the notion of the science of reading, we're all talking about the same thing, because there appears to be some element of confusion around what the science of reading is. There is the science of reading, and then there's the science of reading instruction, which can be a little bit confusing. I'm hoping to clarify that, and then also make sure that we understand what each of those mean or should mean to us. So if you go to the International Literacy Association's website and look up the science of reading in their glossary of literacy terms, this is what it says. It's a corpus of objective investigation and accumulation of reliable evidence about how humans learn to read and how reading should be taught. So that's a pretty good definition. I'll just elaborate a bit on that one. And basically, it is the science of reading is the body of objective research that has been conducted on how humans learn to read. And so that is what we call basic research among researchers, which means it is not meant to be applied to anything we do. It's meant to understand a phenomenon. So as we move then from that idea of science of reading that it's a corpus or a collection of basic research that is used to inform our understanding of a phenomenon called how people learn to read. Then we can move to the idea of, well, then what does that look like? So what the big trick for little children as they learn to read is to learn how to recover speech sounds. They're very well versed as they come to school in oral language. Most children come to school with some basis in the ability to speak and speak fairly well for their age level appropriate grouping. But what we tend to find is, and if they aren't, they've been easily identified by speech language pathologists on how they can be helped to speak. So reading is predicated upon the language base of oral language. And what we're trying to do in the beginning stages of helping kids read is to help them recover the sounds and words that they know in speech by looking at letters and decoding those letters back into the speech they know. So as you look at this slide, in its simplest terms, readers decode in order to recover their spoken language. Decoding allows learners to access the spoken word and its meanings stored in long-term memory by converting symbols into sounds, a process commonly known as sounding out. And decoding letters to recover speech sounds can occur in two ways. And this is really an important thing to understand. One is through a phonological route, which means that the students map the sound that they know that's associated with a letter onto that letter when they see it, say that sound, and then blend the sounds within words to be able to say a word orally that they recognize in their oral language base. That's one way to get there, sound by sound, phoneme by phoneme. Okay, and so that's what's in the bullets below. Visually distinguish letters from one another, be able to hear individual sounds, we call that phonemic awareness, and then know how to connect those two together, what they see, what they hear, to map those onto letters, and then be able to blend that to be able to say words. And combining these skills is not easy. In fact, it's not at all natural. As we bring up in this point here, humans are not born with the innate ability to hear individual speech sounds. They don't do that. They hear whole units of meaning. That's what they're responding to. Yet success in learning to read is causally, not casually, causally related to the ability to discriminate speech sounds in the stream of spoken words we hear every day. So contrasting with many other languages, English uses a complicated and somewhat reliable system of mapping speech sounds to letters. At least it's reliable enough that most children can learn to do it. I mean, English isn't as phonetically transparent as other languages like Spanish or French or German or many other languages. But it is still reliable enough that there are patterns that students can learn. So the first approach that we talked about was phonological. Now we're going to talk about the second approach, which is orthographic mapping. As children develop the ability to say sounds that they see, or say sounds for letters they see in words and blend those together, they start to build up the ability to see orthographic patterns or spelling patterns that look familiar to them. And this is really important because it not only leads to increased fluency, but it also leads to less stress on working memory capacity as students begin to recognize these larger chunks and can attribute to them one single sound. So if you look at the spelling pattern IGHT as an example of an orthographic pattern, there could be 4 individual phonemes that you could try to map to, which doesn't really come out very well if you try it that way. But to know that IGHT has a single sound of IT, that's a whole lot less for working memory to deal with than trying to juggle the sounds of 4 letters. It's just one unit that the eyes see and the brain processes as a single unit, and that makes a lot less from working memory to deal with. So the 2 ways that we teach kids to recover their speech initially would be either through phonemic blending, which would be letter by letter, or this orthographic patterning where they start to see chunks in words or chunks in words they recognize as spellings, and they can attribute an entire single sound to that chunk. And then, of course, there's the job of comprehending a text, which in the early stages of reading isn't all that difficult because we aren't putting a lot of content and difficult ideas into text for children to have to carry as they learn to decode. And that's really by design so that we can get one thing in place before we expect the other, which is comprehending more complex ideas in text. But there's three levels of representation and comprehension. First, they've got to learn to comprehend sentences, and then how sentences get connected, and then basic organization and idea of what the text is about. And one of the things that I would like to point out here is we know from a large body of research that students who come to the reading act with a great deal of background knowledge about the text they're going to be reading are much better off in the world of comprehension than those who do not have much knowledge. About 80% of comprehension is attributable to a student's background knowledge when they come to a text. And of course, we spent a lot of time 20, 30 years ago building what we call schemas for students before reading. But then we spent so much time feeding at the trough of prior knowledge building that we actually overbuilt, and then the text contributed nothing to the students' reading and knowledge growth. So we've got to strike a nice balance there between building some prior knowledge, but learning how to actually process text so that you can learn from it. And so those are the two big chunks that kind of make the backbone of the science of reading. There are a couple of main theories out there that we attribute the science of reading to. One of them is Scarborough's rote over on the left-hand side of the screen. That's language comprehension and all that goes with that: vocabulary, background knowledge, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. That strand gets woven together with the word recognition strand, which is phonological and phonemic awareness, the ability to decode, and sight word recognition. We put those things together and we come up with a skilled reader. On the other side, there's one called the simple view of reading, or SVR, and that is decoding. It's a sort of a mathematic algorithm. Decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. So if you take the ability to decode and you take and multiply that by having a large language comprehension background coming into reading, you're likely to get reading comprehension. Okay, so those are the two big theories behind the science of reading. So as I said earlier, the science of reading is based on empirical research studies that describe the process that underlie how children become proficient readers. On the other hand, we're going to be talking in a moment about what the science of reading instruction tells us. So what the science of reading tells us from basic research is there are certain things that students need to be able to do in order to become good readers. They need to have a large oral language store. They need to know something about how print works or concepts of print. They need to understand the spoken language sound system that surrounds them, phonological and phonemic awareness. They need to be taught how to map symbols onto sounds, or what we call alphabetic knowledge mapped onto the phonemic structure. That's called phonics. They need to know a little bit about morphological analysis, which means word parts like base words, prefixes, and suffixes. They need to know how to spell. They need to become fluent at the ability to decode. They need to have a large vocabulary in both reading and oral language. They need to be taught some strategies about how to unpack the meaning of text or to comprehend. We need to build their background knowledge through a rich knowledge-based curriculum. And this one is really important to me. We haven't done enough of this, in my opinion. Writing often is the road into reading. And we need to get kids writing more. And one of the wonderful things about the Just Right Reader books is that they provide a good bit of writing to follow up on the reading in each of the books. And then, of course, motivation. So those are the things that we tend to see that sit behind the ability to read as a human being, and that includes young children, of course. All right, so now the science of reading instruction. So we talked science of reading. Now, what is the science of reading instruction thing? Well, it's moved from basic research to what we call applied research, which looks at whether or not certain strategies, practices, teaching routines result in kids learning to read. So it's more of taking what we've learned from the science of reading and seeing how that might play out in the classroom, devising strategies and routines for teaching children, and then testing those out in a research environment in classrooms to see if they actually produce outcomes for students. So that's what the science of reading instruction is all about. So then there's this general field called learning sciences, which lies behind the science of reading instruction. We know there's some things that really help kids learn to read. For example, we know that assessment is very, very important. Teaching without assessment is driving ahead blindly into the night. Assessment gives us a roadmap. It tells us what children know, what they don't know, where they are, and where they need to go. And so it provides us direction on how to frame our instruction as we move out into the world of trying to impact their ability to read. We know there's a certain kind of instruction that is more effective in teaching reading than other types. There's lots of approaches to teaching out there. There's discovery. There's approaches of inquiry teaching. There's the scientific method of teaching based on the scientific method. Explicit instruction tends to work very well for teaching reading and writing. And we know that as teachers by a little saying we use, and that is, I do, we do, you do. And then we also know that the format of the instruction needs to be systematic and structured. It can't be happenstance, haphazard, incidental. And we need to move kids toward the use of challenging and complex text, because what we've found is when we make reading practice too easy for students, they don't grow very much in their ability to read. And then there are the foundations of early reading instruction. These include phonemic awareness, alphabetics, phonics, sight words, spelling patterns, fluency work, and writing. So those would be the core areas where we're going to focus our work with young children. So there's a theory of instructional action behind these reading foundations, and it goes something like this. First, students need to learn how to hear phonemes and to be able to blend those together to say words. So the ability to take 4 phonemes like fast and blend those to say fast, or to reverse that process from fast to segment the sounds fast. First I hear a f, then a then a s, then a t, and be able to segment the word apart. So those 2 processes have to be in pretty good shape before we move into mapping letters to sounds. We also need to be simultaneously making sure the kids learn letter names and sounds in order to be able to do that mapping. So that's basically, we're going to move into phonics and blending. So first, hear the sounds in spoken language, learn the letters, names, and sounds, then start blending those sounds through phonics instruction and applying that blending ability to isolated words and then to words found in context in decodable books. This is very important. A lot of schools are finding that at mid-year and first grade, many schools use a testing system known as Decodables. And at the middle of first grade, students move from reading words in lists to reading words in context. And when the oral reading fluency test is reported mid-year in first grade, many children do not do very well at that point. And first grade scores look like they're dipping very terribly. And part of that's due to the fact there's not been enough work prior to that time in first grade and having kids read decodable books as a context for practicing how they blend and recognize words in first grade. So there's also a small corpus of high frequency words that need to be learned. This high frequency word group is made up of regular and irregularly spelled words. For the regularly spelled words, phonics, decoding, blending will get you there. For the irregularly spelled words, very often memorization will be the easiest route to get there. All of this needs to be put together in fast, accurate, expressive oral reading. And then we also need to make sure that kids can write what they read. This is where we kind of leave things out. It's not enough to be able to recognize a sight word or blend a decodable word. Students need to be able to write those words as well and write them quickly and legibly. Bring those two things together and you've got students who can read and write and do it well. So that's the get accurate, fast, and conventional, and spelling is as important as getting accurate and fast and conventional and reading aloud. So then we're going to get into these elements that we need to be supporting as we make sure that students don't regress over the summers. Let's find out a little bit about this first stepping stone, which is hearing sounds in spoken language. We need to be teaching and supporting through the summer months where children have come, especially from kindergarten, in terms of their knowledge of phonological and phonemic awareness. We know that this is important to a good start in reading. That's been well documented since the early 90s. We also know that phonemic awareness is causally related to later reading performance. In other words, if you can do blending and segmenting with words spoken, the chances you're going to be able to do that when you have to map sounds to symbols in phonics and blend is greatly heightened. And the ability to blend is very, very highly related to the ability to say words aloud as you read. We have estimates that show about 1 in 5 children come to kindergarten with hardly any ability to do any kind of work in phonological or phonemic awareness. They're not aware of words in spoken language. They're not aware of syllables. They're not aware of word parts, onsets and rhymes, or bodies and coda, 2 different approaches to chunking a syllable. And then, of course, they're not aware of the individual sounds, which are called phonemes. So we really have to pay attention to this, or we're going to have about 1 in 5 children who are going to have a very rough start to reading. Now, PA is not a magic cure for preventing or fixing all reading programs, but it is certainly an early essential, even indispensable in early reading instruction. So we want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for students to continue to play word games in the summer and to read books that emphasize certain mapping patterns so that they're keeping their awareness of how sounds hear in oral language and being able to map those to the written symbol. So if you're not aware of the difference between phonological awareness and phonemic awareness, it's pretty much this. Phonological awareness is the ability to hear units of spoken language larger than a single sound. So any chunk, syllable, word that's bigger than a single sound is considered working on phonological awareness. We're focusing and drilling down on the individual sounds that you would hear in words is considered focusing on the phonemes or phonemic awareness, the ability to hear and manipulate those. That sometimes gets confused. Now, what PA is not, phonological and phonemic awareness, is not teaching sounds and symbols or teaching how sounds and symbols relate. That's phonics. That's alphabetics, is teaching sounds and symbols, and teaching how those sounds and symbols relate and how to blend and segment them is phonics instruction. So PA is often thought of as working with word sounds in spoken language without letters present. Or some people call this phonics in the dark. You don't see anything, all you do is hear sounds and manipulate them, blend and segment. Now, what the research shows, of course, is that when you bring them together fairly quickly, phonemic awareness and phonological awareness, that's the best route. So waiting until you've taught all the letters and waiting until, all the kids can blend and segment everything that you throw at them. Probably not a good approach. Learning 4 or 5 really good letters to start building words, like a couple of vowels, some high utility consonants, and then starting to take that blending you've done with spoken language and apply that into mapping letters to sounds and blending those. Easy words like mat and cat and fat is important to get things off the ground very, very early for children. That's where the power lies. We get much bigger effects when we start into phonics once the kids have learned letters and are able to blend and segment sounds orally. Okay, so this graph is meant to kind of help you understand the progression of these ideas of phonological and phonemic awareness. So sentences are the largest unit of phonological awareness, then words, then syllables, then onset, rhyme, and rhyming, and that actually should be spelled R-I-M-E, but what kids are hearing is rhymes. What you're seeing is R-I-M-Es. So there's a little bit of a linguistic distinction there that may be too fine a grain for us to bother with. And then we get to the phoneme business, which is the individual sounds. And then you can do various things with those phonemes. You can isolate them, you can identify them, you can categorize them, you can blend them, you can segment them, you can delete them, and add new phonemes and substitute phonemes. The green box is where the power is. If I have to make a decision as an educator where I'm going to put my effort, it's right there in that green box. Okay, that's what drives reading and writing. The others are nice things to be able to do, but they don't contribute that much in terms of effect size to the ability to read and write as blending and segmenting does. So if teachers are feeling overloaded, one of the things you can do to help them, focus a little better is to get them focused on blending and segmenting and not spending equal amounts of time with isolating or identifying or categorizing or deleting, because those really don't contribute much in terms of effect size to reading and writing. This chart's meant to kind of help you get a sense of how phonological awareness works. You start with phonological awareness in that top gray band, you move to phonemic awareness, and then phonemic awareness into phonics. You'll see the approximate grade levels in the approximate units of language in the next level down. You start with word awareness, then syllables, then onset and rhyme, then hearing single sounds, then doing the ability to blend, segment, and then manipulate. Underneath that, you'll see recommended grade level bands for when this should be taught and accomplished. So you would see that for pre and K, pre-K, they should be able to hear the number of words in a spoken utterance, the number of syllables. And in kinder, we would, review that and then get right into the business of hearing single sounds and words spoken, and then be able to blend those sounds, segment the word into sounds. And then first grade, first semester would be attention to manipulations like deletions, substitutions, and additions. The band below that is what instruction might sound like, so that you can kind of get a quick idea of what instruction might sound like there. The one below that is what we might ask the students to do in response to the instruction. And the row beneath that is just some helpful hints. So if a person doesn't know what we're talking about when we say how many words are there in a spoken utterance, we're just giving them a quick example. And then notice this one at the very bottom. What the National Reading Panel found was somewhere between 18 and 20 hours of phonemic and phonological awareness instruction is typically effective for most children. So that's in the lifetime of a student. Okay, that means, if you take a year and a half to do this work, which is what we're showing here, basically, your lessons would be regularly about 5 minutes long, and you would cover everything you need for most children. Unless they're diagnosed, they're not getting it. Most children benefit from about 18 to 20 hours of PA instruction totally in their life. And after that, what we saw is the curve flatten and actually turn down on time spent teaching PA. So we also know that PA instruction's most effective when it's coupled with alphabetic and phonics instruction as soon as we can get there. And so that means we've got to talk about letters now that we've talked about hearing sounds in spoken language, or PA. We're going to talk about this business of learning letters for little kids is tough. And one of the things that I've worked with Just Right Reader to produce are these letter books, which I think are just magnificent. And they're great for kids to maintain their knowledge of letters from preschool, kinder, and into first grade. So let's take a look at the work of learning letters for children. Some people think learning letters is a pretty simple matter, but it's really not. If you look at this diagram of, say, the lowercase letter K, what a student has to know in order to put this into long-term memory is all this information about that symbol. They need to recognize that symbol as something different than all the other symbols they see in the world and know that it has a name. So they got to recognize it, they've got to name it. They have to build an association of this symbol with the sound. And fortunately, in most letter names, the sound is represented. That it's made by producing a number of critical features in writing. So a vertical line, a diagonal line, and another diagonal line. So there's three features. They have to be able to think of, other things in their world, objects, pictures, experiences that start with that sound, They have to develop the ability to use motor codes to transcribe the letter legibly and quickly as they write. They have to be able to categorize this letter as a lowercase letter rather than as an uppercase letter. And they also need to be able to discriminate this letter from all the other letters that they might see in a display of print. That's quite a bit to learn when you consider how much a child needs to know in order to know these letters well and transfer that working memory capacity that is taken up by all these things to learn into a long-term memory that they can access and retrieve easily and bring in and out without much work. So the work of teaching alphabet letters is not easy, and it's not easy for children at 5 to be learning this either. So what we know from a meta-analysis, which is a study of studies, published in the Reading Research Quarterly in 2010 by Piast and Wagner, is that multi-componential alphabet instruction is the most powerful and effective. So a lot of teachers will say, well, should I teach the sounds and then teach the letters, or should I teach how to write, or should I teach how to read? Well, what we find is that doing all those things that I showed in the previous diagram in a lesson would be most helpful. Be able to see the symbol, name it, associate it, write it, pair it with something they know, like a kangaroo or something else that starts with that sound, kick, whatever, and then be able to know that this is lowercase and be able to discriminate this in a page of print and find K's as quickly as possible. And so all of that bound up in a good lesson would help students get better at letter name or letter learning, alphabetics. Okay. All right, see if I can move us forward. So multi-componential instruction is the most powerful. So what does that mean? What does that look like? Well, it looks like the kids are going to focus on the sounds, they're going to focus on writing, they're going to focus on recognizing graphic images, they're going to focus on categorization of upper lower, naming letters, discriminating, and critical features. So you'll see here one of the Just Right Reader letter books. And you'll see that there's words represented so that they can find the letter that's being looked at. You've got an upper lower case representation for categorization. You've got an object, a map that is something they can associate with a sound. You've got how to write it, so the kids can trace that with their fingers or with some other writing device, and then practice that again and again. and then again, another word that you might associate or object you might associate with a letter. So this all becomes very important and a good practice opportunity for students. What does the research say about the instructional pacing for learning letter names and sounds? What we know is a letter a day is probably best with distributed review and practice. I'm giving you a couple of research citations here of work that I've done with one of my former colleagues and doctoral students, Cindy Jones and Sara Clark. This is now, part of letters training and so forth. A letter a day seems to be about the right speed for introducing new letters. And then once you've got alphabet letters taught and you've got PA working, bring it together quickly into phonics instruction, which for reading is going to be blending and for writing is going to be segmenting. The whole goal of phonics, of course, is to acquire sufficient knowledge and use of the alphabetic code so kids can make progress in learning to read and write. That's the whole point of it. And good phonics instruction has a delineated, structured, planned, sequential set of phonics elements, okay, that are taught explicitly and systematically. That's really key. That a school adopt a good program that has a planned, sequential set of phonics elements to be taught, and that these are taught in lessons that are both explicit and they're taught in a systematic fashion. In other words, everybody's on board teaching it the same way as from room to room, grade to grade. Okay. When we talk about this systematic phonics instruction, we're talking about stressing for kids the acquisition of letter sound correspondence, and that's to be used to read and spell words. It's not to be learned for its own sake. It's to be applied in reading and spelling every single day, every single lesson. So an example, if we look at the hallmark of non-systematic phonics instruction rather than systematic, so that we get clarity on these concepts, is that this is a place where schools and teachers, classrooms may have a series of books they like to read with kids. And they look in the books and go, oh, look, there's quite a few D words here. We'll focus this week on the letter D. Just sort of, and then, we'll ask kids questions like, well, what words in this book start with the D sound, that type of instruction does not work. When it's incidental, drawn at random from books you're reading and done in a way where kids have to discover what the sound letter connections are, that does not work. That's pretty clear now. So, and people have done this. It was most highly associated with practice of what we call whole language years ago, and to some degree, balanced literacy in today's teaching practices. What we're trying to teach kids, of course, is that initially there are single syllable words that they need to be able to decode. Closed syllable words like CV, CVC, CVCs, and CVCC words. Examples down here. Kids need to be able to code those words. Then we ramp it up to final silent E pattern, and then to vowel digraphs and teams, and then to our controlled vowel words. And you'll notice here another product that Just Right Readers has put out are word books, not just letter books, but word books where you're going to practice individual words, and then they have decodable readers that practice certain phonic patterns. So you've got to step up from letters to words to contextual reading, which I think is just a brilliant set of materials to provide to children and to parents and to teachers. And then, of course, diphthongs and blends and consonant LEs. So those are the spelling patterns that we would expect to be taught in kinder and first grade. And then beyond that, we move into multisyllabic words, which would be really the primary province of second grade teachers. Also, in phonics instruction, we want to make sure that kids learn some high utility prefixes and suffixes, and be able to recognize those prefixes and suffixes as units, orthographic patterns that they can say, instead of in or intro, and having to sound that out when they see intro as shown here in this prefix column. That should be recognized as a whole: intro, pro, post, so that it makes less work for working memory as the kids go through the act of decoding and mapping words. There are some other high utility orthographic patterns that were developed and forwarded by Marilyn Adams. These are known as word chunks for teachers. From this group of 37, you can produce well over 1,000 words in reading and spelling. So, by way of quick research base, for phonics, systematic phonics is more effective than unsystematic phonics or no phonics. Phonics programs are all significantly more effective than non-phonics programs. Although the type of phonics program, and we're not going to get too deeply into that, we didn't show a lot of difference, just the fact that you had a good phonics program. Third thing from research, systematic phonics is effective, irregardless of where you teach it, whether it's one-to-one or small groups or whole class. Systematic phonics is effective in helping prevent reading difficulties. In other words, it has more power to prevent reading difficulties than to correct them once they've occurred. That's something we don't often talk about. Phonics is not the best cure in the world for reading problems, but it's probably the best preventative for reading problems. And it's very effective in the early grades. Okay, that's the preventative power. Once we get past first grade, the kids are still struggling. Into second grade, phonics has less power to correct than it does to prevent. And systematic phonics instructions that help children at all SES levels learn to read. The effect sizes are 0.4 or higher if you're familiar with Hattie's work. But the children who were in the low SES had a 50% greater impact on them than it did students in the middle to upper SES strata. So that's really interesting to know too. The children who are in low SES strata are 50% impacted by 50% more of an effect size than children who are outside that group. So it's really helpful for kids coming out of poverty. And then there's 5 types of phonics instruction that the National Reading Panel talks about. Most people know this one, which is to teach kids the sounds and letters and then teach them to blend them. Mat. Okay, that's synthetic phonics. There's analogy phonics, which I know these words already. I've learned them, in my sight reading work. And so I can, I can by analogy take the at part, okay, and put on new consonants and come up with a whole bunch of new words: bat, cat, at, sat. So analogy is knowing a word part, okay, like this here with the at, and being able to make a lot of new words from that word part by analogy. Analytic is, this is a word I read, I recognize it, and I can now talk about how it's built. With the word bat, there's a book at the beginning and at in the middle, and I can analyze that, and I can do that with other such words. So the ability to analyze words into their sounds that I know already. Spelling, taking spoken words to writing, that is called segmenting. That's the ability to take a word like cat, I can hear it, I can stretch it, I hear 3 sounds, I can represent each sound I have with a letter. I can either come up with a C or a K there for little kids, or A, T. That way I can spell those words by segmenting. And then embedded is applying phonics knowledge in text. Okay, so in decodable books are the best kind of early practice because they get more opportunities to respond to what they're learning in phonics than in just texts that are not decodable. Dr. Mesmer, wonderful colleague nationally, good friend personally, explains that beginning reader decodable books are great because they allow kids to apply their knowledge of the sound symbol mapping system and demonstrate really good decoding at the end of the year. So it really supports good decoding. So these decodable books are really important to make sure kids have access to keep them going forward. And then from Lindsay, reading decodables helps children become more accurate readers and rely less on the teacher and apply phonics more frequently. So in summary, what kids need to help them through the summer is a set of materials where they can continue to practice and solidify their knowledge of letters, their knowledge of words, and their ability to use all of that knowledge in reading texts that are supportive of their early reading efforts. Those texts are called decodable texts. And having access to sets of materials like that are going to be most useful in helping students maintain and accelerate their reading through the summer months and not suffer from what we call the summer reading loss problem that is so pervasive in our schooling system in the US, where we have yet to go to an 11-month school year. And, we're still stuck on 9 months. Most of the rest of the developed world has gone to 11. So we do suffer from this sort of summer reading loss quite predictably, based on the fact that we pull kids out of school for 2 months more than other nations do. And so having access to these materials, ready access at home and in summer school programs will really help kids maintain and accelerate their ability. So I hope this was useful to you to kind of get a quick overview of why and how we need to keep, young kids' reading achievement moving forward in the summer months. So at this point, I think I'm supposed to turn this over to our august colleague, Sara.
Yeah.
And Sara, do you have your own thing you're going to share?
I got my own, Ray.
No, I figured
Do you know, Ray, I just want to say, and Christy, I'll let you jump in if you want to, but it never gets old listening to you. Like, I feel like it is, it's so crystal clear of like phonics and practice doing your phonics, like decodables is the kids just need more of it. In fact, you always say this one thing that, I kind of marvel at each time. You're like, you only need 10 minutes a day is what I heard you say. Like, I've heard you say it now, every time I've heard you speak of the instruction shouldn't be overwhelming. We should work on sound and segmenting, and then we should give kids practice. The more that we can like give it into tiny chunks and give them more practice, the better off they'll do. Am I summarizing in my head of like my most important takeaways?
Well, sure. What we want for kids is to not spend so much time with isolated words and sounds, but to put that to work in connected reading and writing. That's what's going to really help them. And that's where we really see this first grade slump at mid-year on Dibbles tests when you go to the ORF. Kindergarten and first grade teachers have not been having kids spend enough time practicing connected text, reading and writing. And so when they hit that test mid-year and they have no background in it, bombs. And you'll see that in your scores every single year, principals in first grade. You'll watch that mid-year Dibble score just take a dive. And it's because the kindergarten and first grade, there's not been enough work in connected text practice, both reading and writing. And that's what I like about the Just Right readers is they always put writing next to reading.
Well, I mean, you helped us, like you actually pushed our thinking a lot of as soon as you learn your letter sounds, you wanted us to move right into the word books. Like we designed those word books based on your theory of action. Huh? What'd you say?
Yep. Put them to work as fast as you can.
And then keep it going is kind of what I hear from you. Like once they can start reading, the more that they are actually reading words, the better off they are. Is that what you'd say?
That's right. And, decodable texts are really, really powerful and important in K1. I mean, that's their domain. And, once you start moving into multisyllabic words, it's a lot harder to, to pattern those books very, very well. Although I would love to see a series of books, patterned out for morphological units. We've talked about this.
You know what though, Ray? Everyone talks about this though. Like everyone, we love symposiums like this. And you say this, Heidi Ann Mesmer says this, Laura Tortorelli says this, like everyone talks. I mean, I feel like you helped us create a product that is really good for the K2s in the letter sounds to word books. And then we now need to create something. I mean, we did our syllables in our 3 to 5 books, but everyone's like, we want to do more. We want more 3 to 5 books. Like we can't do enough.
Exactly. Because that systematic practice is, and the thing about decodable books and any other pattern books like these is that it makes sure kids get more practice in the same amount of time than you would normally get sort of doing it randomly.
Right.
Because you're making sure that those patterns are showing up frequently in the text. And the number of responses kids have to make to those patterns is directly related to how well they'll do on reading and writing later on.
That's powerful, right?
It's practice opportunities. The
Yeah.
more practice opportunities you get in the same amount of time, the better you're going to do. I tell this to teachers, ramp up your pacing. Because if you could cover 6 words in 2 minutes and the teacher next door can only cover 3, your kids are going to have 50% more practice opportunities and they're going to do better on the test later on.
So I want to sit there with that because I feel like this is like a powerful thing, what you just said, which is the more chances kids have to practice their decoding skills in actual books, not just like words, not just like the more successful they'll be.
Especially
right?
on the ORF test, which is what most everybody's using these days, the oral reading fluency test.
And then, so let's just like sit, because I'm pulled up this slide because this is what our solution to summer slide is. Like our solution, knowing that kids are constantly falling backwards in their reading, right? We do all of this work. We're constantly pushing kids forward. We're like, we did it maybe at the end of the year. And then we start again in the fall and we're like, damn it, it fell back, right? I mean, it's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's as predictable as can be. And the sad part of it is, Sarah, is that the children who are performing least well make losses over the summer.
That they're the biggest losses, is your point. Those kids that are most at risk.
Yep.
The ones that we think about all the time, the ones that took the most effort to move them forward.
We're putting them more at risk by not making sure they're continuing their work forward through the summer.
Okay, so I wanted to take a second because this is what we worked on this actually a lot of thinking about knowing that kids have a summer slide. What could we do to keep them practicing over the summer? And we created actually a product like around this for summer for two different products. So we have during the year that you can buy our decodables. People send us their reading data. We then match them with 10 science of reading decodables that are exactly what that child needs to work on based on the data. We wrap them with the idea that, like you talked about it, I think you said motivation is how you described it, that kids really need that motivation and that matters. So our theory of action is they can see themselves in our books, the representative of kids across America's schools, and we're literally putting their name on it and wrapping it with the idea that, like, we want you to be motivated. We want you to feel special. We want this to be a literacy experience, right? And then we even added on, so I feel like you may have said this, but actually you said it right now. The more times they read those books, the stronger they're going to be. Heidi talks about this a lot. So we added that paw print on the back of all of our decodables so that if you read this book 5 times, then you'll do better. And then we added in the writing sheet, right? All of our decodables and our take homes have a pace to work on writing. Like I heard you say that a couple of times today.
I can't say that enough.
That reading connection, right?
Yep.
And even probably, Ray, there's probably something also physical about it, just like doing the handwriting practice. Is that it?
That's another way to code. There's some cognitive scientists have shown that writing leaves a deeper memory trace than just seeing and recognizing. because
So we added that in.
there's
This
a
was basically,
motoric, there's a movement, there's a motoric code that has to go along with writing production.
so we did this because you told us.
The actual friction of the writing instrument and the drag on the paper or the surface, as you develop this motoric coding to produce a letter quickly, legibly, accurately, it leaves a deeper memory trace than just seeing the letters and saying the letters or any other type of writing.
I love it, right?
It's really important we get this writing thing up and going. I know the schools I'm working with here locally that do a lot of writing, their reading scores are through the roof. We just got our initial data in a kindergarten a week ago from a city school district. And the kindergarten students the year ago, they were at 74% proficiency benchmarked on nonsense word fluency. And this year they're at 93%. There are 11 kids district-wide in kinder that weren't benchmarked. And on our lowest performing school among that group, they went from 52% to 95% with only 5 children school-wide that weren't benchmarked.
I mean, that's amazing, right? That's our dream, right? That's why we're all in it.
All reading instructors to get kids to that kind of a place. Let me point out one other thing though, Sarah, that I hope you'll bring up is this little video lesson. If you're going to provide these to kids at home and parents are going to support this little video lesson that shows parents how to effectively work with their students and teach good lessons with them in order to make the practice powerful. I think it's one thing that you do that nobody else does that will support summer reading for kids.
I mean, I think it's exactly why we did it actually, because parents, our theory of action, Ray, was that parents want to help their children. Everyone wants their kid to be so successful and they're just not sure how. So we did these. Yeah, they want to. So these video phonics lessons are in Spanish and English with the idea that no matter who you are, you can support your child to become a stronger and happier reader and yourself, right? Like, Ray, the other thing that was amazing that we didn't actually think was going to happen was some parents are starting to learn to read by watching the videos alongside their children. I know.
Isn't that great?
That wasn't our thought process, but it's been really nice to see. So districts around the country are purchasing summer packs for the summer. Houston is buying 1 pack for every week of summer school and 1 extra pack to go home at the end. Prince William County is buying, I think, again, another pack for every week of summer school. Trying to think of who's doing we're so lucky because we work with so many districts. We get to hear this innovation that's happening all around the country.
Sarah, you had one question in the chat. The videos do come in Spanish and in English. And we also have a question. Do the text also come in Spanish?
So we literally are just now, Ray, making our Spanish text. So we have Decodables in Spanish, and we have right now that you could buy right now, a take-home box for every child that's a 1 box, like a skill set, kind of like for your kindergartners, you'll buy a 10-pack. Of 10 books at kindergarten level. For your first graders, you'll buy a first grade pack, 10 books for second grade level. So we also have for every child, you could buy a skill review pack, which is 1 box that every single kindergarten take home, every single first grader. And I heard you really clearly. Something we think a lot about is if districts don't have the money that they want to buy this for everyone, Ray, you would say, buy this for your kindergartens and first graders. So that's what I heard you say of that is the most important people to think about. Is that it?
That's why we track the kindergarten scores, because if you don't put the foundation in the house, there's nothing to build on.
Sure. Yeah. Ray, we added in something really tiny that I think is actually super important. Every single take-home pack that when a district purchases it, Fort Bend, they told us we really want backpacks. We really want backpacks so that kids can take them on the bus, they can take them in the car, they can take them wherever they are. So we added in backpacks, super tiny, very super tiny, but had a huge impact.
Great. I remember
those kids
cross-country trips playing, and reading in the back seat growing up. So I think it's a great idea.
Mine was my station wagon went the other way, right? It was I saw the world that way. But I think you're right. Like, so we feel really good that some districts are buying summer packs for every week of summer school. Some districts are saying like, we're going to buy 5 packs and just send it home with kids in a backpack. And then other districts are saying we can't buy, we really want to do something for everyone. So we're going to buy 1 skill review pack for everyone across the district. Done. Fabulous. So
And
Ray,
Sarah, when you're talking about sending 5 packs home and there's 10 books in each pack, are you really at Just Right Readers sending home 50 books with kids?
yeah, some districts are even buying over 100.
Wow.
So each pack has 10. We love it when they open it one pack before the end of the year, like 1 pack on that last day of school, 1 pack so you get the feel, so the teacher can show you all those different fabulous features. And for the people that are buying it for summer school, it's really nice because they have like Annie, Robert, and Maria are all getting the same book. So they can start doing small groups in summer school, because now, Ray, we even have worked on your kind of like guidance to create really good lesson plans with these. So we feel really good about that. So we just keep trying to get better and better about what we think is like good for kids to make a really good product.
Awesome.
Christy, I feel like you've heard me talk about this so many times. What did I forget?
Oh,
What did I not say?
I love the fact that you're doing this stuff for parents and for teachers, because what you're doing is making it accessible. Teachers don't have a lot of time. They've got 1,000 things they've got to do every day. And to have this readily available in a format that is based on solid research is going to just save them all kinds of time.
I mean, Ray, we feel really lucky. Like, you said something to me and I just want to like highlight it. Like, we do what you tell us. Like, when you tell me to do something.
Yeah, you do.
Well, no, but we go right back to the team and like, huh?
I said, I've worked for other publishers that aren't quite so good.
But it's about kids for us. Like, this is really kind of the reason why we do these symposiums. The reason why is how do we make this really easy for teachers? How to really easy for families? And whatever you tell us, we think is the silver bullet for kids. So we're going to make it happen and easy for districts.
Absolutely.
Christy, what have I forgotten? What do you think?
I think you've hit almost all of it. We are running close to our hour. So I was hoping, Ray, if you could end us on a positive note. Let's say I'm a building leader, whether that's, an instructional coach, a principal, maybe I'm even a district leader, and I'm about to send kids home for summer. I am prepping for next school year. I know I have struggling readers. Can you give us, these building and district leaders, 1 or 2 things? What is your 1 or 2 biggest pieces of advice that they can do to support the foundation of reading or even help those struggling readers?
Well, first, you've got to make sure that you get the parents involved. Okay. So whatever you can do to help parents, access materials to support their students during the summer, that's going to be really, really important, because they're the ones that are going to have to carry the ball here. Okay. you got them to the 50-yard line, but we got to get them to the goal post at the end. And if we don't have those parent support through the summer, we know this reading slide's going to happen. The second thing, other than, getting parents involved, and I think, is going to be getting materials in their hands, because they're just like teachers. Parents are busy people. Many parents have more than one child to be dealing with, among many other things, sometimes more than one job. And so it has to be accessible and easy. So the 2 things I would say is, you got to get parents involved by the end of the school year, and then you got to put the materials in their hands that will be easy to use and accessible. And then the third thing I would say is provide some kind of mechanism for motivating parents and children to use these things throughout the summer, and check in with them periodically.
That's great. Taking notes. Per usual. Well, thank you so much to Dr. Reutzel and Sara Rich. We feel so fortunate that Just Right Reader puts on these symposiums. They truly bring in the best and the brightest, the most relevant researchers in the science of reading, and we all get to benefit. So thank you, Sara, and your team for bringing us all together today. If you have not already, check out justrightreader.com. You can get a free sample sent to you. There's also a place too, if you want to meet with someone from the team at Just Right Reader to see how the take-home decodables or even the classroom libraries could benefit you and your school and your students. Please, you'll get this recording after the session today. So please make sure if you have a friend or a colleague who would enjoy it, please feel free to share it with them. We have all kinds of symposiums going on all the time. So be sure to get on our email list and you can find out about them as soon as they drop. So thank you so much to Dr. Reutzel. Thank you so much to Sara, Rich. We had a pleasure, just a great conversation with you, and it was a pleasure to be with you. So thank you so much and have a wonderful day to all of our audience members.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
summer.
Thank you.
Bye, Ray.